Great show today. We've been visiting with attorney Joe Pippen. He's been educating me a lot about estate. I have no knowledge about that. Luckily, I don't have much estate to give, so it's not going to take too long to break it up. But before the break, we were talking a little bit about people contesting wills and different things you can do to ensure that your will or your trust is respected. And it just occurred to me that nowadays, with technology has given us all these new things. We have fingerprint scans and retinal scans and ways to get into our car with codes. Is it still come down to a signature? If someone walked into you with a will and said, this is his will, I've got a signature right on this document, how do we determine which will is correct if someone's going to be unscrupulous and try to present a false document?
Well, yeah, the last will is the last will. So if someone thinks that's not the correct hand signature on the will and it was forged, well, then you have to hire somebody a handwriting forgery expert.
Now, as you age, I imagine your handwriting changes, your signature changes over time. I could see some wiggle room in this thing.
Yeah, but see, a will has to be witnessed by two people, and it has to be notarized. So, a notary is going to notarize. So we have to get a person's ID. We have to check off whether we knew them or whether they presented an ID. So, and I'll copy the driver's license and keep that part of my file. So I think it'd be hard to contest one of my wills because we go through the steps. My witnesses are my staff. I'm the notary.
Well, I'm sure
we have to have proof of ID.
So Joe's closed the loop quite a bit. Perhaps Joe.
But also there are forms you can buy through the internet and try to do it yourself. Now most of the people are going to make a mistake on trying to do it themselves, and then all of this proof and files and all this about who the witnesses were and who the notary was and whether anybody forged anything. Be much easier if they try to do it themselves.
We talk ad nauseum on the Consumer Quarterback Show about working with professionals. Whether you're going to sell your home, whether you're going to hire a roofer, whatever you're going to do, make sure you're working with a professional. Check his background, get into his documents, talk to folks that worked with him. Make sure you have a reputable person that you're involved with. There's no question there's a lot of fraud opportunity out there. You certainly have to be diligent about that, regardless of if you're hiring somebody for home services or something as drastic and large.
There's also a difference between contesting a will and trust. So if you contest a will, you can just file a claim in the court. And as we talked about, if I was on the side that was receiving the objection, I just object to the objection and make them prove it. Mm-hmm. And that's a fairly easier process through the probate system than it is to try to sue a trust. If you're going to sue a living trust, you have to actually file a lawsuit. There's no just filing the claim with the court like in probate, because the probate system is already there. Much harder to sue a trust, because then you have to actually do a lawsuit against the trust.
So you're going to have to hire some attorneys and spend some money.
Spend some money. So it's harder, much harder to sue a trust.
So as you see, there's a lot of terms that a layperson may not be familiar with. We've talked about a little about probate and trust and will. You need to have a real definition of what these things are to find out what's best for you. And, of course, again, working with a professional like Joe is going to make sure that you don't make a mistake. But as he mentioned, the online approach, we've seen the DIY approach go wrong just in terms of the home services, pest control. You name the amount of vendors that have come in here and said, boy, I had a horrible scenario where I got a customer called me and said, boy, they tried to do it themselves. They made a mess of the situation. Let's not do that with your estate, please. Let's get in touch with Joe and make sure that we have all our I's dotted and our T's crossed. Joe, you must have some stories, though, about misrepresentation or fights or squabbles or someone that tried to cheat the system with a false document or maybe created a false scenario.
Well, Mark Twain said, you never know a person until you share an inheritance with them. And that I see that true all the time. And a lot of times family members will just fight over, mom's sewing basket or thimble collection or dad's hole-in-one plaque, or there's some things that you never would think that meant anything to someone, and they're the things that the people want, personal things. So a lot of times personal things, are not titled. And a lot of personal things really aren't worth a whole lot. They just have some sentimental value.
Right.
And it seems like that causes the biggest fights among family.
I can see that.
Now, if a person listening wanted to make sure a family member got a particular, the family Bible, everybody wants the family Bible. It got notes in it and all kind of historical things stuck in the Bible and so forth, and it means a lot to some of the family members. So when I'm doing a will, there's a clause in the will that authorizes a separate writing provision, and I give them a separate writing form, actually, where they could itemize personal things. And that's going to take away the fight. The grand piano goes to the daughter with the piano lessons, and you can itemize personal things. very special personal things. And there are a lot of historical items in families from one generation to another. And you want to entrust maybe something very, very special to somebody you have in mind that you know will protect it and save it and pass it on to their family. So you can make a list of special personal things, historical things, family things, diamond ring, engagement ring, father's pistol that he had when he was in the military, things like that. You make there's a special form to itemize special non-titled personal things that stops a lot of the contesting about
I
who
would
gets
say
what.
that's something I wouldn't have considered, and certainly would not have gone into the minutia of every little item. And that's exactly what I could see happening with people.
Well, it's not every little item though. It's maybe a handful, maybe 5 or 10 items at the most.
Like you said, whatever creates sentimental value for someone is certainly beyond. We can't always understand what that might be. I was just made a note here. If someone had a estate, they had a home, and the benefactors said, "Let's sell the property." Given our real estate market in Tampa Bay and the trends in real estate and the values changing, I could see that a particular family member might need that money or want that sale executed immediately, whereas someone might say, well, we're going to lose a lot of value if we don't sit on the... Have you ever seen that play out with the real estate asset? Yeah,
the person in charge, though, is the person nominated to be in charge, the personal representative of the will or the trustee of the trust, and that person's in charge of making that decision.
Okay.
Now, usually I advise them, if you can get, communication solves a lot of problems. Just continually communicate with the beneficiary, see what they want. If there's a disagreement as to selling now or selling later, then, get something from a realtor telling you now is the best time to sell.
Mm. So you have to make a case.
Yeah, make a case for yourself.
Understood. So that's just something I thought about it timing-wise in terms of, you can't always plan for someone's demise, and certainly not the value of their current real estate at that time and the value in there. And there may be kids in the will that are juvenile at this time that would stand to benefit greatly if we could wait and get the sale at max value.
One of them might want the condo on the beach.
Sure.
And there's 3 children, and one really wants it and the other 2 don't. So if there's enough money in the estate, the one could take the condo as their share. Let's say it's a $900,000 condo and there's $2.7 million in the estate, and just to give a real easy example.
Right.
So the one can take the $900,000 condo, and the other 2 can take $900,000 in cash or stocks or, whatever can be appraised to equal their same values. And if the family really gets along, one can take $900,000 condo and give the other 2 mortgages.
Right. So Joe's talking about, as you mentioned, communication being the key. Everyone's got to talk to each other and understand where we are. And certainly addressing these issues prior to the event is going to be key. So you have an idea what the deceased wanted, what everyone agreed on, those kind of things. It's the families that are separated, that come together at the time of the death, that don't really get along or haven't communicated in a long time with each other. That's the scenario that's going to make the worst possible settlement.
Estate planning gets interesting if a couple goes through a divorce, because a lot of times one spouse will be given the right to live there for a while, and they're also charged with they have to sell it within a time frame. A lot of times that happens. So what happens if they don't really want to sell it? And do disruptive things along the way to turn people off that might want to buy it.
I didn't think of that.
You see that happen,
Sure.
right? That happens. So then you have to become aware of that somehow. I mean, and then you have to take corrective action. You might have to get the person out of the property while it's trying to be sold.
Have you seen private investigators deployed in this scenario where they're trying to decide what someone really using that property, or what the value really is, or what they're doing, or are they trustworthy?
Yeah, sometimes you have to use private investigators for certain things. I don't think it's real common though. I had a problem. I had a situation recently. It might be interesting to talk about. So what happened was a wife died. She was the owner of the house. It's like a second or third marriage.
Okay.
Her husband stayed in the house, and he allowed his daughter to come live there with him, and she was a heavy smoker.
All right.
And this lasted for a couple of years. So we went from a nice house to one you could hardly walk in without gagging from the
Right.
smell of the smoke. So actually the person had a life estate, and then when when that person died, it went back to the daughter who was the sole beneficiary of the property. But now she gets this property back that's worth less because it has to be super deep clean to get rid of the smoke. Yeah. So they put a claim on the estate, and we actually wound up paying to have the house completely to a deep clean.
I'm curious what the dollar value of that would be, I wonder.
I think it was really severe. So
Wow.
I think it was like maybe $20,000
Right.
to get in those walls.
Yeah,
and,
carpet, paint. You're talking about the whole thing.
yeah.
Holy cow. A lot of these things you're never going to consider unless you sit down with a professional and talk about what could happen or what should happen. It sounds straightforward. I'm going to leave this to her and X to Z. And then in the real world, as we know, things don't happen. The values change. Siblings don't get along. Things are contested. I just thought whatever you determine as values as best you can, you've got to communicate at that point with everybody that's involved, right?
Yep, that's right.
That's the key. All right. Joe Pippen, Ask an Attorney. He's going to be with us one more segment. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to finish up with Joe and our feel-good story about the Currys serving up 15 million meals during the pandemic. Don't go anywhere. We got a feel-good story for you. Check us out online at consumerqb.com.
Hey, this is Grant Cardone, and you're listening to Consumer Quarterback Show.